When I was 16, my school in central London offered Russian lessons for the first time in its history. I was one of 3 slightly nervous volunteers for this project, and we were taught in a class by a man who'd learnt Russian while serving in the Royal Air Force. There was a lot of learning Russian in the British Armed Forces at this time. Some of the cleverer graduates became spies, and some became school teachers. We puzzled over the unfamiliar alphabet and the unfamiliar sounds that came out of our mouths. And then, slowly, we were introduced to Russian literature. I remember very well the first book I read in Russian. It was Asya by Turgenev. I was a very close friend of one of the other boys in the class, and we seemed to respond to Russian literature in a very personal way immediately. For instance, we were very bad at getting out of bed in the morning, and so we naturally sympathized with Oblomov, who spends a great deal of time in bed. Unfortunately, our mothers wouldn't let us stay as long as Goncharov allowed his hero to do. Another example, in our mildly rebellious pseudo-existentialist way, we imagined ourselves as characters set apart from the rest of society. In other words, each of us was a Lishny Cheloviek. And I particularly felt close to Pechorin in Geroi Нашего Времени, a book I still admire tremendously. I even had a phase of imagining that it would be a romantic thing to save a prostitute. Not that I'd met any prostitutes in my short life, but I got the idea from Tolstoy's novel Resurrection. And many years later, I found and bought the first British edition of Resurrection, which I'd like to show to you. It's there. It's a tall, thin, strange brown book. It looks as if it's bound in wood. And it was published in 1900, that's to say, a year after the Russian edition. That's what it looks like, the front. And it says that all the money coming from the sales of this book would go to support the Dukhabars, who had been persecuted by the Russian government and were now resettling in Canada. A few years later, some fellow students and I rented a van, and we told the owners that we were going to Scotland. This was a lie, because if we'd said we were going to drive to Russia, they would not have allowed us near the vehicle. We were away for 6 weeks: Minsk, Smolensk, Moscow, Leningrad, as it then was, back to Moscow, Kharkov, Kiev, Odessa, and out through Romania, that's right. In Moscow, I remember going to the GUM's department store and buying about 25 records, LPs, of Shostakovich and Prokofiev for what seemed a very small amount of money. As for the van, it came back to England with an East German battery and 3 Czechoslovakian tyres. I didn't return to Russia for another 50 years, by which time your country had changed massively, and for a start you couldn't buy Shostakovich records in GUM. But those 50 years of my life had been enriched by a frequent return to Russian culture, especially its music and its literature. Official relations between our two countries have not been exactly harmonious over the last couple of centuries and more. But at a personal level, British people admire and revere Russian art and culture. We adore Chekhov as being the greatest playwright in the world, apart from Shakespeare, that is, of course. Pushkin, Lermontov, Gogol, Turgenev, Tolstoy, Gorky, and so on, they all feel as much a part of our literary culture as they do of yours. The other week I was arguing with an opera expert about who the greatest composer of the 20th century was. We disagreed, but there were only 2 candidates, and they were both Russian. Shostakovich, of course, and Stravinsky. And yesterday there arrived on my desk a new translation of a book I'd enormously admired when I read it in the 60s, which is the several volumes of Paustovsky's autobiography. And I look forward to that with keen interest, seeing how my views have changed and whether the book has changed. All this is a long and rather roundabout way of saying that I'm very honoured and also deeply moved to have been awarded the Yasnaya Polyana Prize for my book, Nothing to be Frightened of. I would like to thank the judges of the prize, my publishers Azbuka-Аттикус, who have supported me very strongly in these last years, and, of course, the Tolstoy family itself. Thank you very much.